Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Ron Sisler, of course. I know everyone here, and Marianne Borba and I will be just talking a little bit of our SRM from the university perspective, and then as applied to our college, and then some ideas, and a lot of time for questions, open questions and answer period. I have a few questions to start the discussion, to tee up. So many of you know that we've been, I was just talking with someone, Amy Geib, who was here just earlier, a professor, and when did we start the SRM, the Strategic Resource Management? I said, right around the time I got here, which is now almost 5 years ago. And I had previously at Milwaukee, we had just implemented, and we were in the third year of our SRM, like type of approach, which is basically kind of built on a resource-centered, responsibility-centered management approach, an RCM. So when I got here, we were still in the incremental model for another 2 years. But I was part of teams that were looking at revenue and expense and cost centers, and then all of that talk went into building a framework for our college or in our university. So the incremental model before that we were using was basically you had your same budget as the previous year, either up, increased, or down. And as you probably are well aware, typically it went down. I don't know if you guys know that the peak of enrollment at the university was in 2003-04, where there were just over 30,000 students here. Currently, we're at about 17,000. So the RCM in part was put in place, or the SRM in our case, to kind of respond to the fact that we're projecting decreasing enrollments over time. And we still are. Over the 10 years that we're currently in year 3, so 3 years ago, it was projected that the state of Michigan actually was going to go down by 28% in high school graduates in our community. We're the worst state in the union, by the way, in that respect. I think, just heard numbers, I think Illinois is second at 26%. And then I think Wisconsin and Indiana, some of the Midwest states are hit the hardest. And you might want to think why. Well, some of the demographics and people moving around are a big cause, or coming new potential folks, diversity in our population coming from in the South. And you might want to think maybe in the future, if you think of some other trends that are happening in our climate and so on, we actually over time might actually be getting more and more people in our community. So these are current projections based in the current 10 years of about 28% decline in enrollment, continued over what we have felt already. So we have to be prepared. So in the historical incremental model, the unit leaders, and you can take it from the unit being a college or a department, they're responsible for managing the direct and indirect expenses only, just the direct expenses. That is the people, the other expenses like supplies, equipment, printers, those types of things, travel, some of those other things incorporated in that, just those direct expenses we were responsible for. And any decisions regarding allocation was based at a unit level. And as many know, when I got here and before I got here, it was really controlled in the dean's office. And a budget was given to the department on an annual basis, depending on whether it was incremented or declined. They typically did change year to year, but it was with across the board cuts. You probably remember those, right? 2 to 3% decreases, sometimes up to 6%. And a lot of it was also based on what the state was giving the university, as well as for sure our enrollments. Indirect costs were largely invisible to the units. Things like our space, things like custodial, grounds, pretty much all of that was covered. We didn't really consider it, think about it, and we didn't have to worry about it. The larger budget and finance department had to figure out to make sure that we can make it year to year. So, but along with that, no inherent incentives to maybe drive enrollments or to think differently or be creative, even though a lot of that happened, the creativity. There was really no motivation to do that. Remember when we opened the PT program? We had to fight and scratch and claw for those funds to be added to our base budget, right? And it was given to us, so we had to put everything in the kitchen sink in there to make sure that it was successful. So we asked for that bolus of funding, I forget how much it was, 2.5 million, let's say, added to our base budget. And so that was a decision that had to come from the Board of Trustees, had to find the finances some way, even before the first student walked in the door. So it was a decision by finance to come up with those funds. In a responsibility-centered budget model, or an RCM model, the revenue and expenses, both direct and indirect, are allocated to revenue-generating units according to a set of rules, and I'll get into those in a second. At WMU, we have 7 academic colleges, and you know of these academic colleges. I'll talk more about them. Year-to-year changes in budget, whether we get increases or decreases, are driven by changes in revenue and expenses of those units. So now we're all looking at it, and it's transparent to all of us what each of our colleges have in revenue and expenses. I'm going to apply this to our college in upcoming slides, or Marianne. Budgets may also be changed via changes to subvention. I'll get into that in a second. Very complicated in the way we're implementing it. Or by strategic changes determined by leadership. So leadership in the college level and at the departmental level. I'm looking at Jessica as an example of a change that we made through our leadership to open a new program, and I'll discuss that in a second, how we did it. In its intent to make direct costs more visible, transparent, and to incentivize efficiency and growth. So with an RCM approach, we have to consider 3 things. Timelines, like when we do this, what rules apply when, rules to allocate revenue, and rules to allocate indirect expenses. So a time period has to be discussed on how we roll it out, how we project revenues, because that's what we have to do. And if we roll those revenues across a period of time, like a 3-year rolling average or a 2-year rolling average, because it's really difficult to go based on a current year and say exactly, we have to estimate what we will look like the following. So we have to smooth it out a little bit in order to really be able to manage well. There's rules to allocate revenue. We have undergraduate tuition. We have graduate tuition. We have state appropriation. We have F&A, or indirect cost expense from grants and contracts. We have course fees. We have differential tuition and miscellaneous income. And I'll get to a rule of thumb that we've used a little bit later at WMU. And there are rules to allocate indirect expenses, things like space and facilities, operating costs for non-revenue generating units, which we call cost centers. And cost centers are really those facilities, activities, things like space, things like heating and air conditioning, all those things that we have to allocate that are indirect to the full operation, but are very necessary to give us a place to work and function. Did that move? No, there's a hold over here.
Yeah, just like
There we go. Okay, I figured it out. Okay, some of the SRM rules that applied to WMU that have been made over a 3-year period. We're looking at a 5-year initial model where we have a formula based on all of the inputs over time, and we're looking at revenue expenses and averaged over the prior year and current year. So we're looking at a 2-year rolling. We entertained a 3. It didn't really impact either way very much in our way of predicting. So we decided we take the previous year and the current year, the best we know throughout that year. Just think of summer 1 that we don't know until real late, but the best that we can project, a 2-year rolling sort of look at the revenues in a college. Some revenue allocation rules. Undergraduate student tuition and fees. That includes all actual tuition paid, and it's at a discounted rate because we have to smooth it out, and we have other things to pay for like scholarships and so on. Those are pulled out, and it's not the sticker price that you see with what a student would pay. And sometimes that changes, and we have to always get clarity on what that discount rate is. And it's distributed among colleges based on a percentage share of the undergraduate student credit hours that are generated by that college. And then, by the way, we kind of do that with our departments on the percentage of the undergrad generated by that department with their programs. For graduate student tuition and fees, it's all actual tuition that's paid, distributed among the colleges based on a percentage of the total graduate FTE or full-time equivalent to that headcount to that college, enrolled in that college. So 1 FTE would be 6 or greater credits enrolled by a student. That student would get a full FTE for fall and spring, and greater than 3 credits in the summer. And 0.3 FTE for students enrolled in fewer than 6 or more, in 5 or fewer. And 1 FTE is worth $15,000 per year in student enrollment, tuition and fees. And oh, by the way, I don't know if you know that WMU did try to simplify tuition, and they got rid of some of the fees actually, and make it simpler for our students to really calculate what the price of a degree would be. The state appropriation is a third revenue stream. It's distributed among college based on percentage of total FTE count, both for undergrad and grad. And for undergrad, it's shared if there's double or triple majors, and the graduate student tuition as well, and those are added together for our state appropriation. So 1 FTE is about $6,800 a year. A few other rules for WMU with the SRM. Indirect costs, or F&A, 70% goes to the college, 10% to the PI, 10% to the department. You might say, well, that only adds up to 90%. Before the distribution to the PIs and the college, 10% goes to ORI, the Office of Research and Innovation. So off the top, they get 10%. The PI and the department also get 10% of the total. So ORI, the PI, and the department all get 10% of the total F&A costs generated. The college is left with 70%. And the college doesn't get 70%. We get the UPA applied to the college distribution of 70%. The PI and the department or ORI do not have to pay the UPA. The college does. And the college pays the UPA on the total amount, not just 70%. So we have to cover the total amount of UPA of the total amount, and we only get 70%. I know that's a little confusing, but it shows that we are committed to giving the PI and the department as much as we can, as much as they did in the past. If any group's going to get the tax The UPA, do you know what the UPA is?
No.
Sorry, I assumed you did. The UPA is the University Participation Assessment. And it's a tax. It's basically a tax to pay for those indirect costs. Remember that we never really saw the indirect costs before because the university and the incremental amount paid for it all. Yeah, we might be getting taxed, but we always paid a tax because we never saw that revenue in the first place in the incremental. We only had the funding available for the direct costs. So you should take away one really good thing is if you're an investigator or a department that's supporting the investigation related to research and grants, contracts, innovation, you're being fully supported with the 10% off of whatever you put in and whatever you earn in a grant. You're getting 10% to your account. We will take care of this. And actually, even though it doesn't seem quite right for the college, we're actually making a little bit more even after the UPA, I think 1.5% something, than we did in the previous model for the college. So it's all good. It's about what was paid in the past. Differential tuition is allocated directly to the college, and it's usually been here at the undergraduate level, right? And not for every college. I think 3 colleges have a differential tuition: business, fine arts, and aviation, or is it engineering? I think it's engineering. We are able, though, in some of the developments over the last couple of years, to maybe start adding differential tuition to graduate credits, to graduate programs. In the past, it's only been undergrad. We should be able to, now I'll talk about this later, there's some opportunity there, and it's market-based pricing. So we can talk about that later. Course fees are also allocated directly to the college. There's a little twist in there, I won't get into the details. But we get the money, the departments get the money, but the UPA, the tax still has to be paid, even though you might not, you see the full amount as a department. So we can talk more about that if there's some confusion. Other revenue support, internal funds from another WMU unit, the provost office support, we have an example of that lately, allocated directly to the college. And there's some miscellaneous revenues, external revenues, fees from a conference, continuing education, and those are all allocated directly to the college. Still, we have to pay the tax, the UPA. Any revenues coming into the university must pay. The only exception is with auxiliary units, right? The auxiliary units take in revenue for a certain purpose, usually a service to the community, and they have to meet their expenses with their revenues. They have to zero out. However, they have like a 4.5% UPA.
4.01%.
4.01, much smaller. They do have some assessment because they have to report into the university, and there's business and finance that has a role. All right. So there's also some SRM rules as it relates to expenses. I just talked about revenues. So there's direct expenses, and most of those are in the form, I like to always say about 97.5% of our budgets are people. Faculty and staff salaries and fringe. Fringe is currently 53.25, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Just checking, it tweaked a little bit. It went down actually from 55.25, something like that?
Yes.
So it went down a little bit. Operating budgets, graduate tuition allocations, part-time instruction, overload instruction, summer instruction, and any other direct expenses that we have paid by the college units. Course fees are expenses. We not only get them as revenues, but we pay them out. We need to give the student what they're paying for in those course fees. F&A and indirect costs. So 20% is allocated to the PI and department. I covered that before, it was 10 and 10, right? So 20% of it is allocated already off the top to the PIs and the departments. Space allocation, so we pay, I have another, oh, there it is, $12.86, it's costed out per square foot. And we've done estimates of our footprint, our college here, our building here. Unified Clinics is not considered, no, because we rent there. But EWB is included in our footprint. It's been complicated with other units because other colleges, think of arts and sciences, they're everywhere. And there's a lot of co-location of colleges. Ours has been fairly simple. And then the university participation assessment, which I assume that you knew, but you didn't, sorry about that, is the flat percentage of all revenue used to cover costs for non-revenue generating units. So what are called the support system around the colleges, basically. And that's currently at 43.15. It was at 43.6, 41 last year, and it was actually reduced a little bit this year. And it's constantly being looked at as to what that UPA needs to be. And it's a tax. So, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Ann now, and she's going to talk about, in the same way, the revenues and the expenses that we talked about that are happening at the university level, how does that affect or apply to our college?
Thank you. So as you can see here, this is what shows our college's revenue and the projected revenue that we are projected to generate this fiscal year. Again, based off the 2 years that Ron had indicated earlier. And as you can see, the undergraduate tuition revenue, we're projected to generate $16,710,887. Similarly, with our graduate tuition revenue, which is based off of graduate FTE, we're projected at $13,174,817. We don't have any differential tuition this year, so we're going to skip that portion.
And we haven't historically. We've never been with the undergrad sort of able to charge differential tuition. It was those 3 colleges only.
Right. And then state appropriation, this is what we received from the state for this fiscal year, $17,058,144. And then we also have our indirect cost recovery, so our F&A, 90% at $432,590. And this is pre-tax, if I'm correct, that we are expected to generate, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't include the UPA 43.15%.
Correct.
And then course fees, we're looking at $498,117. Revenue support, which is pretty much just internal transfers that a college unit will transfer funds from one department to another, is not subject to tax because the university does not want to double tax anyone for those purposes. So no UPA attached. That is an amount of $77,638. And then other assigned revenue, that's no dollars added to that. So we're looking at a total revenue for this year of $47,952,345. That's the revenues, so then we're moving to the expenses. So in addition to the revenue, we do have expenses as well added to our overall budget, and our direct expenses, again, those are the booked budgets that are attributed to a college unit's funding cost centers, Fund 11s. So those direct expenses are generated at $19,979,004. F&A 20%, that is attributed to our PIs and departments without any tax added to that. We're looking at $96,131. Course fee expenses, again, $498,117. Our GA and DA stipend allocations, the allocations that we receive every year, that are set dollars, $454,616. That is the allocation monies that we attribute and we manage and oversee at the college level and distribute to our units for GAs and DAs.
Before COVID, that was double that almost.
Yes, and we did not have to pay for tuition before
Right,
COVID.
right.
And now we do. Now we have to pay both stipend and tuition. Our space, which the space that we can account for in the college and with the EWB portion of EWB, we're looking at $2,426,141 this year. With the UPA, a university participation assessment, once that is pulled after we generate our undergraduate, graduate, or state appropriation dollars, we are looking at a UPA assessment of $20,659,009. That takes into account all revenue except, of course, for those internal transfers of revenue support. And those of you that are familiar with object codes that are attached to fund and cost centers, those internal transfers are contributed to the object code of 8995. So that is the object code that is not subject to tax.
I want to also add another thing that subject to tax is any endowment funds. Anything from the development office or whatever, those aren't taxed.
So overall total expenses is $44,113,018. If you take into account our revenue at $47,952,345, minus our total expenses of $44,113,018, we are looking at a subvention amount, which Ron will talk about this in a little bit detail further, of $3,839,327. Further slide we'll have.
So the bottom line there is our revenues more than cover our expenses, right? Even with the UPA, even with UPA, space costs and everything, we have more than enough to cover our expenses to the tune of about $3.84 million.
So this is just a summary of what I just explained in a spreadsheet detail. With our undergraduate tuition, graduate tuition, state appropriation, our other revenues that we generate at $47,900,000, and then our expenses as well. Just a little bit of a breakdown there with our salaries, compensation fringe, operating expenses, as well as F&A, our other fees, course fees, GADAs, that is at a $1,048,864. So if you, again, deduct the revenue minus the expenses, minus UPA, and also space, and we're left with a net revenue of $3.8 million. That will be allocated, subvented, strategically allocated to other colleges who actually don't generate as much revenue as what they expend throughout the year.
So I think words mean a lot. And in the previous slide, unfortunately, we had subvention, and actually, purposely we put strategic allocation. Remember, if this was a pure RCM model, responsibility centered management, guess what? We would keep all of that $3.84 million, right? That would be ours, but we're not. Instead, as a university, we strategically allocate any dollars that a unit might have over to other units, at least in the short term, right? This is a second year. implementation. Last year was sort of a hold harmless. I'll talk a little bit more. This year's the first year of implementation. But we're strategically allocating. Why? Because we love fine arts. Because we need arts and sciences. They're the base of a lot of our coursework later on. I didn't say that, like biology, chemistry. Those are the basic courses, English, all kinds of basic courses we need out of arts and sciences as the base for our students moving forward in our college. So we value all of that, and strategy is value. If it was pure RCM, you wouldn't put a value on anything. You would just put a number value on it, and then everybody is out there for her or himself. So it's purposely we're using, and it is strategy, we're allocating to other colleges.
So a short takeaway for SRM. We are proportioned and positioned as a college very well financially this fiscal year, as you saw in the previous slides, in comparison to other colleges. We are generating $3.8 million more in revenue than what we expend. And of course, I think we mentioned this in a previous presentation too, the subvention return model, it continues to be adjusted over time. And we do anticipate that the marginal amount of $280,000 in one time will be received by the college this fiscal year. And we are continuing to work with chairs, directors, and administrative staff to review, the detailed accounting for their units to see an overall picture of how we're looking as a college. And we're also continuing to work with college leadership to just fine tune those details as we plan for next fiscal year. So again, there's going to be slight ongoing shifts with the SRM model as we continue to adjust to this new approach, to this new SRM. So there will definitely be more to come and more information shared as those adjustments are made.
So I'm next going to try to demystify what's going to happen with the strategic allocation, the subvention in our future. There it is. So with strategic allocation or subvention, it's really, think of it this way, funds reallocated from a unit that has a revenue positive over expense, the revenues are greater than the expenses, to a unit that has expenses greater than revenue, right? And we're just shifting those dollars and we're subventing other units. The initial subvention model was dependent. It depended on the rules that we set up for the SRM, right? The initial year, right? Institution using RCM models must decide how to handle subventions for the future, and we've gone a certain way on that, and I'm going to explain that in a second. So we could have done where some universities have taken that initial look, the full disclosure and transparency look, and just held that subvention forever. We're always going to subvent a unit at the level that you see now, but then let's encourage those units that think they need some more revenue, or they want to, rather than taking some of the revenue back, I'm going to improve my programs or do some other things in order to increase my revenues from there, and anything after that you get to keep maybe, right? So it could be in perpetuity that those would stay. Subventions may be increased or decreased over time. They may have an expectation of zero subvention, so that at some point in time over the course of a 5-year or 10-year period, one unit will not be subvented any longer, that they have to come up to the zero mark and generate revenues to meet their expenses or reduce their expenses to meet their revenues. We could have gone a few different ways. Subventions often reflect activities that generate less revenue than they cost. For example, small course enrollments. Just think of oboe instruction, for example, that's used. That's a lot of cost for that hour for a single student.
we have a lot of costs in a lot of our course delivery, especially when it comes to labs, where we have few students with a certain instructor. It also is related to a sort of accreditation required student-faculty ratios. We cannot increase our student numbers. And for example, nursing, I know it's a pretty strict, social work even has a strict student to faculty ratio, and others do too. So there's some, not limitations, there's some parameters put to some programs where you need to instruct in a certain way. And so sometimes we can't help it, right? Fine arts can't help the fact that they have this one-to-one instruction. And think of their spaces. We can get more into this. They have these huge spaces that they're responsible. Think of us of a stage or a place like this even, but times 5 where it's square footage costs. I heard this one time that someone suggested that we do a cubic foot cost for space. And I'm just thinking, think of large lecture halls, and you would do a cubic space cost for that. So it's gotten kind of, everything's been thrown as a possibility. But I think we're doing it pretty reasonably, is what I'm trying to get at. So you may have seen this if you were at it, some of our college meetings, that here's the basic financial status in a nutshell of our colleges. There are 3 above in the positive, us, education, and this is just this current year. This is this year. It was different last year, right? It'll be different next year, by the way. In fact, I think we were at 3.42 million last year above, and now we're at 3.84. No, we were at 4.2 million last year. Now we're at, why? Because we got some money back from last year to this year. So our amount above the line over time, I'll show you the model, will shrink. Will be more toward the line. Why? Because we're going to get some of the dollars back. Now, how we expend that money should be strategic as well, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But look at some of the other colleges. I mean, fine arts, they have 4.2 million in space costs alone. That's double our space costs, as an example of why it's so costly there. So they wouldn't be so much in the red if the model wouldn't be also contingent on the space that's required for that college, right? So you can change these things, but the way we decide to implement, here's where we are. Any questions about that? So it's about 16 million of the colleges above, and it's the subvention, 16 million of the colleges below, right? It's a zero-sum game here with our revenues and our expenses. All right, now we have a handout, because I know you can't see this. But this is either a very fun part, or it's an amazingly frustrating part of the subvention model, or the strategic allocation. But I think it illustrates, if you look at this graphic, it illustrates that we're not doing a simple RCM approach. We are not saying that you have to cover all your expenses as a college with your revenues. And this will take a little time to explain, but we're willing to do it. So as I go up here and kind of explain it, I'm going to point to different aspects of the model here, and if you want to follow along here. And there is there a back?
Some of this one, yeah, that's the original.
So a framework that we're using that will take us over the next 5 years is that there is a variation in how much overall, I'm not going to point yet, a variation of how much initially the colleges that are going to be allocating above the line are allocating to those below the line in the red. It's going to be gradual.
And this year, the first year of this subvention was 10%. 10% of what the colleges that were in the red will be needing to cut of their budget. So CFA, 6.4 million, they have to cut $640,000. It hurts me to even say that. Just think of how tough that will be for them. Remember, a lot of theirs is space. So how the hell do you cut, that much money when 2/3 of your amount in the red is on space? So hold that at bay. Then it gets more than that the next year, and then more than that the next year in the percent that they're going to have to cut. So, bear with me. So the colleges here that are in the positive, all of the money, remember we had 3.84 million? We put all of that money that we're above into a pool. All of the 100% of what we're above, 3.84 million. CFA, for example, put 640,000 of their money into this pool, right? They have to cut 10% of their budget in this first year. They put in 640, we put 3.84 million, business puts 7 point whatever million, CEHD puts 4.1, whatever, we're putting all of that 16 million in the pot. 1.6 million from the colleges in the red, 10%, gets put into this pot. Okay? So now we have about $17.6 million in this pot. Well, then we allocate it from there. And 3 areas that we've chosen to allocate are really the allocation pool of the positive college. The positive colleges get money back. We get, if there's an increment in, this is really difficult, either positive or negative in that revenue expense ratio. If your revenue expense ratio goes better, you get an allocation based on that. I know, I'm looking at Dawn. I won't look at Dawn anymore. You get some proportion of that funding back. And then a quality indicators pool. Yet, to be fully developed, it's under development, we're still working on it. Part of the reason why is we have a new provost. We wanted the opportunity of our new provost to weigh in on these quality indicators. So it gets divvied up in a 40-40-20 percentage of that allocation pool, year 1 of the subvention model. Look over here. Year 2, A and B, A here would be 20% of the amount they're in the red of any given college has to be is put into this allocation pool. The revenue generating positive groups only put 80%, not 100% into this pool. And then it's distributed in a 25-45-30 ratio back down for the next year. And so on and so forth. By the time we're in year 5, now remember, the amount in the red for the red colleges is going down though, right? They're not as much in the red. Right? Because they're paying. So it all kind of converges, is theory, together that by the time the red colleges in the red, year 5, they're giving 65% of their revenue into this pool. The colleges in the green only 35%. But remember, our green in the colleges is going down. It's shrinking over those years. Their red is shrinking, and so it's sort of converting or going through a conversion. Then we believe, we'll have to see, this is a 5-year cycle. There could be tweaks along the way, and there already have been, and I'll tell you why. But at some point in time, I bet that colleges will be subvented to some degree, and the way it sits right here at a 35% level, if you will, roughly speaking. There will be subvention. It never will be zero. Or we're not thinking it will. All right, there was something I said in there. So the original year 1 allocation plan was tweaked a little bit. The first one is because this couldn't be implemented here, because there was no increment from the previous year to go off of, right? So this never was implemented. Really, this was implemented and alone, year 1. This wasn't implemented because we didn't have the quality indicators ready to go. So already there is a tweak to the tune of, think about it, we're getting about $280,000 back. If you would have taken the 100% of 3.84 million, and then, but then it's a total of $17.6 million in this pool. We got 40% of that, doesn't add up. It was tweaked to the tune that we only received $280,000 back, year 1. I know that doesn't add up. So I think what we believe is happening is there is some modification, because we cannot, as a university, devastate our colleges that are in the red that quickly. I mean, we can't do that. That wouldn't be smart. We would need to lay off faculty, fire staff. I mean, 97% of a budget is people, except for CFA, has huge space costs. It just would have devastated them. So, and then this is also the 5-year plan on the differential distribution. It wouldn't be, again, 20-40-40, it would be 25-45-30. Ultimately, it would be 35% in this allocation, 65% in how colleges do year over year. If you do better, you're incentivized, and it's the proportion that you do better, and the proportion you do worse in that incremental, so that most of it lies in this pool. So that's where it starts incentivizing creativity, new programs, other things as well. These colleges, we're one of them now, but by year 5, 0% will be coming to make up that striking difference at the beginning of the 5 years. Where we are going to be then is we're going to be needing to do some really good work, strategic work here, more than anything, and of course, high quality and student success. So the model is pushing us to be creative, responsive to our communities and what students need to attract students, and to do it in a quality way. All right, so now what? So these are just the slides that you have. Some of the initial ideas about the quality indicators, that is that this column here, this distribution, the quality indicators are here. Now some of these are kind of tight to the original revenue model, right? Because if we have good student success, although we want students to graduate, that doesn't necessarily keeping revenue, right? We don't want to keep on getting revenue from students. We want them to graduate. We would love to have 4- and 5-year graduation rates that are better. So FDIAC retention rate, when we talk about underrepresented minorities, Pell eligible students, first gen students, what is their retention rate? Graduate student completion rates,
4-year masters, 7-year doc, we do pretty well. We actually do really well with our masters. Our PA and our public health has a little bit more flexibility built in. MSN, maybe some flexibility on how quickly. I don't think it's fully cohort, right? But our PA program, I mean, they're cohort driven, they take and they're done in 24 months. So they vary a little bit, but we do okay. Doctoral graduation rates, we do pretty well there too, in 7 years. And we have our one doctoral program. And then we're looking at a graduate student diversity related metric as well. Academic excellence and faculty success, 30% of the framework, 30% of that one column, right? And then, so metrics of teaching excellence, quality, innovation, scholarly works per traditional faculty member, whatever that might be. It might be papers, it might be book chapters, it might be books, it might be grants. It can be a mix of those things. National rankings, and then other, we're supposed to look within our college at what we do well. Put those, not just to do well on those indicators, but then we will be our own baseline. So if we choose a set of quality rankings that we think we want to focus on, well, we're pitting ourselves year over year against ourselves. So you can only probably get so good at it, but you don't want to go down in some of these quality rankings or indicators. We got the chairs and directors gave a lot of input on that. We have some thoughts on it. As we roll out our strategic plan, we might want to revisit those, and at some point in time, we'll be asked to firm our quality indicators up as it relates to our college. I know that's a lot. So, some implications for our college. And I think the overall title of this slide should be patience. Seriously. First of all, there is a 1-year base budget lag for subvention. So we heard this year, when did we hear? Maybe October, November, that we were going to get 200. Now, it's because there were tweaks to this allocation plan being made. But we heard finally in October, November that we were going to get about $280,000 back with the subvention or strategic allocation pool model back to our college. It was one time. Why? Well, first of all, it was middle of the year. Second, we'll get that 280 to our base budget next year. Okay? All right? I'm thinking of all kinds of things with that, but we'll get it next year. So there's always going to be a lag, right? There's always a lag in enrollment projections, right? And so we have to, the second bullet, we will need to protect against overcommitting those dollars. We have to be very frugal. We will have to come up with a framework where we allow some of it to be worked on with our chairs and directors on what are our priorities across our college. Remember, we're all okay. We're all, as a college, we're okay. If you look at the budget SRM projected down to the department level, we look a lot like the university, by the way. We have 4 and 5, something like that. 4 above, 5 below. But we're okay as a college. We don't have to make a drastic cut here or there. We have high cost programs. We have programs that generate a lot of revenue. We should be reliant on each other. I hope we are. I think we are. And any dollars we get back with the allocation, we should be very judicious in how we use those funds. Because guess why? The first thing is, what if our enrollments drop? Then all of a sudden we're overcommitting, and then we can't even make our budget for that year because we overspent thinking, oh, that 280 is ours. There's going to be no problem with enrollments. Remember, the enrollments are based on the current year, and as we get actual counts within the year that we're at, the next year, and then when we're in it, it was from the previous year to the year we're in. So it's dependent on enrollment in SCH. Proportionately, not only against where we were last year, but proportionate to the rest of the university. And our prior and current year enrollment averaged. So it requires strategy and successful academic programs and course offerings. We're doing a bunch of that already. We're pretty excited in some areas of what we've done. And we have to consider, I feel it's our responsibility to consider the return on investment, not only to our college. We can't be so narrow. We have to make sure that it makes sense and it's a return on investment to the rest of the university. We're tied to the rest of the university. I want CAS to be highly successful because they prepare our students. And by the way, if they don't prepare our students well and they get cut after cut after cut, you think they're going to be ready for nursing? Think they're going to be ready for some of our other programs? No. So we can't cut them too much. And things that we can do will help them. And I have some ideas about that. So we presented, a number of us deans, Carla Kretsky out of CAS, Ray Thompson out of Aviation, Dan Guyette out of Fine Arts, and myself, presented to the Faculty Senate Committee on Budget and Finance, I believe, or Policy, back in February. And the feedback we got there, and it's people who are faculty, staff, Jan Vanderklay's on the committee as well, Betty Dennis from our college. I'm forgetting if there's other people on. The feedback we got, like immediately, well, this is the first time that we've ever heard the SRM explained in this way, and they thanked us for it. They also thanked us after we had some discussion, because here are some of the questions that were asked, not only there, but I've gotten from other people throughout this period of time. I want to put these out there. We don't have to focus on them. But then I want to follow up with where we kind of are with our college in strategy and what we think we can do to not only help our college, but the university. And the fourth bullet was I changed it here. This is nice and big now. I like this. I just touched the screen and now it's the full screen. It wasn't before. If there's any spillover impacts or consequences of this budget model, are deans and chairs, and are they going in their own corners and creating their own world, and even more so than before, as if we did that, but to generate more income and not thinking about the rest of the university and have that sort of attitude. And there's some very negative, would be a lot of very negative consequences to this budget model. So there's some consternation over all of that. And then how are the cost centers incentivized to control expenditures, right? A lot of times we hear if we don't use all of our funds, we lose them. Are people being very careful, judicious, and can we bring the UPA down? Or do we need to increase the tax that we pay? What is going to happen in that whole realm as well? And then how will revenue centers and cost centers coexist, especially if we have decreased enrollment? Remember that UPA, what is it, 43.15? Well, what if enrollments go down? The UPA, it's 43.15% of a smaller pool. How do those cost centers survive? How do we pay for heat and air? How do we pay for our buildings? All of that. Is it going to be then a forced incentive to, do we lower the UPA proportion? I don't know. We have to figure that out. But those are questions that are being asked. Do you have any questions from what I presented? Then I have a lot of ideas. Yes?
I'm interested in knowing that money that comes back, are there timeframes on that? Are there, like, either you use it or you lose it?
No.
Or
No.
are we gonna be able to be strategic about, hey, we've got this new program coming up, we
I
need to
love
get
the way
things
you're talking.
back?
I love the way you're talking. First of all, no, that will be not that first year. Like we had 280,000, that was one time. Next year, it's gonna be added to our perm budget. Okay, so
But what you said, so we're not gonna lose it. If we don't use it, we're not gonna lose it. What'll happen is if we don't use all that we have, it'll be in a reserve and we get to use it in other ways. Now, that's one time if it goes into, but the base budget will go up. Then we strategize. There's no immediate tight time frame. I want us to be very strategic in how we use the funding. And I think we need some time to catch up to this because we, again, just heard about this. So then how do we even talked as chairs and directors and the leadership team, do we do like an RFP process? Okay, we have this much available. Maybe we make 75% of it available. We want to keep back 25 just in case, or 50-50 or whatever. We'll get better at this over time and do an RFP. Well, what are the needs and why? And how does this improve our responsibility to students? How does it improve student success? How does it XYZ? Brenda?
Are marketing dollars distributed from each college or from the broader university?
What's that?
I'm talking about student marketing. I mean, if we're losing students and if the arts and sciences suffer, do they get it, does the marketing distribution coincide with the needs of the programs?
I don't know. So you would think marketing would have to, well, first of all, marketing, we should be ahead of the curve, right? We should be marketing for things that we think are of need and that the community thinks are of need, right? First of all, we should know that so that we protect against reductions. Now, the overall demographic is going down. We have to remember that. So we're operating under this decline. So what are some other students we should be looking at? First of all, I'm getting into something else now, I know. But how marketing is proportionally distributed, the cost centers, we don't have any way of knowing right now, Joel, I'm looking at, of what proportion of the marketing team, for example, is allocated, and is it proportionate to our needs? Is it proportionate to the dollars we bring in? First of all, no. And the first question, is it to our needs? I don't know. Now, we have a marketing person within our college, which we should be doing communications. We're looking at more marketing. We used to have a marketing person specifically for this, but that I think we can determine what our marketing and communication needs are as well. And maybe some of our dollars go toward shoring that up, getting social media blasts, finding out more of the need, doing marketing research, although we had WMUX for that. The marketing here is kind of, I don't know about marketing, I know more of the communications part, and that's for the whole university. I didn't answer that very good at all.
Well, no, that was just fine, and I know it's kind of peripheral to what you're talking about today, but it's related, I think.
It's related. And we don't have enough understanding of the cost centers to know if it's proportionate or not, or how that will impact them in the future. As enrollment goes down, the marketing budget will go down though, proportionate. So, there needs to be work from the cost centers on making sure that we're on top of this and we're all working together and understand each unit's needs and where there's opportunities. It's our job to let them know, hey, we have a health administration program. We found out, we got approval in June of last summer for last fall. We got 5 students over the 2 semesters in. This year, as we market and communicate, we have 35 applications for fall of next year. It's absolutely wonderful. Looking at the students, we're not just getting maybe students that were just HSS or HSV students and they moved, not just that, not just business majors, former in HCOB, now they're doing health admin. There's a few of each, but hopefully they're new students
that we've captured their imagination, that it's a great degree, a collaborative degree. I don't know if I've answered that well. Any other questions related to the model?
I'm trying to envision what the hope is for the College of Fine Arts. I don't know what it's gonna look like in 5 years. Will they just end up having to cut programs? I mean, what are the methods for them to have a future?
Yeah, you know, that's it's been a real struggle. I know Dan personally, and we've had a lot of discussions as deans. I think it might be programs. They might want to keep the programs that they're amazing at, have national rankings. I'm hoping that, I heard even today, of maybe one very small program that might have to go away. We've had to do that, you guys. We did it with the COVID cuts. We were looking, and we're still looking very seriously at some of our, but at that time, you guys remember, we lost, I think something like 19 faculty took the incentivized retirement, which was well more than we expected or needed to meet our budget cut, which was 22%. We even hired back 8 people. And I can say in one department, Judy, we had to make a tough decision. We could hire 8 people back. 2 were for speech, language, and hearing sciences. And we had a really tough discussion about what we were going to do with audiology at that time. So we suspended it. Because the decision was, we have 2 faculty. And we lost so many of the audiology and a couple of speech. But do we take the 2 people, the 2 openings, and apply them, one in audiology, one in speech, and then not be able to run a fully effective audiology? We'd get by on speech. A decision was made, put the revenues toward 2 people for speech. At that time, it was a really, really difficult decision. And we had to do it back then, but we never had to cut faculty. It was voluntary retirement. So that, we've done this a couple times. We suspended the gerontology. We had to make tough decisions at that time. A lot still to come. Can you imagine fine arts? I cannot. Now CAS, it's so big, there's probably a lot of room for strategic cutting of programs, possibly. I don't know where those are at. But there's much more to work with. Yeah, fine arts. In a way, I wish the budget model. Oh, I can give you an example. When we're looking at our departments, as a team, we made the decision to, when we lay it all out, and who's in the red and who's in the green, we're okay as a college. But we decided strategically, rather than counting square footage or doing this, we were going to treat space costs across units related to revenue. So the more revenue that you have, the more you're gonna, I'm looking at Jan, but I know. But, and actually SIP could make even a greater argument, because SIP has, not only do they bring in the most revenue and they have the fewest expenses, they have a lot of part-time faculty, right? So we know there's a priority to get, to shore up the faculty in SIP for some strong programs. And we are rocking it in how do we think of pathways for our students that prep them well for whatever, whether it be going right after their bachelor's into a work situation or going on for an advanced degree. So it's going to be tough for fine arts. So I wouldn't mind, it would reduce us being in the green, and you're going to think, well, why as a dean would you ever do this? Why would you recommend that we do let's look a little differently at the space thing, because it's
it's going to devastate fine arts. But again, 2/3 of that deficit is related to space. Not really, because we have the space that offsets it, right? So it's not fully that, right? Because they have space, we have space, they have proportionally more space. But could we do it via revenue? And then someone would say, well, that's not fair. I get fairness, but I also worry about devastating something we value in the fine arts, and it's a damn good College of Fine Arts. For as small as we are here at Western, it's one of our shining stars of this university. So, any other questions? We're only about an hour into it. It seemed much longer, an hour and 15 minutes. If you want to bear with me though. So we've done a lot of things too. One thing I wanted to address is this whole thing, well, are we going to just go and develop the College of Health and Human Services and not care about the other colleges? We're all ready. And we started this when we first had thoughts of the SRM. We were working on the SRM. So this isn't after we got our model. The bachelor's in collaboration with HCAB, we didn't care. They're teaching almost half the courses. We're teaching much more. But maybe 2/3, 1/3, or whatever it is. This is student credit hours though. So wherever the course is taught with the undergrad, we get the revenue, right? But for the student can get a health administration degree with a minor in business or a minor in leadership and business strategy. I talked with people at Core Health yesterday, and they're excited about this already. They want to collaborate in some way where they get the talent from us. And they're really excited. Course offerings with other colleges. We have Intro to Adults with Disabilities. We worked with CHHS. I think you know about this, Dawn. If you don't, so sorry. But one of the CHHS faculty needs something for their load, to fill out their load. So she is agreeing, and the dean there is agreeing that they could teach one of the sections of Intro to Disabilities course. Well, isn't that a great thing? Now, those are two examples of two colleges in the positive. Seems easy to do, right? Right? But there's other things. We're looking at pedagogy courses with CEHD for our doc program. It'd be wonderful. That's what they're good at. Let them teach it. We'll figure out in the background how we pay for it. Animal-assisted interventions. We're working with a faculty member, Dr. Angie Moe in College of Arts and Sciences. She has an expertise. We have students who would love it. Carla and I, Kretsky and I, she's in the red, we're in the positive, but we didn't care. We said, we're gonna offer it, see if there's a need, a desire, and then we'll figure it out after the fact. So there's examples of working together. I would love, and not required, but maybe as a strong option for anybody in HSS, I know Jan, you get thrown, then maybe they get a minor in biomedical sciences as well. Why? Because it would help them for a pathway to a different advanced degree, or in the opportunities that they might have for a job. And then, so the revenue share and MOUs can be worked on behind the scenes. We have a big example of that, our SPADA and holistic courses. Because at the graduate level, it's headcount. Well, guess what? The headcount is in education and human development. They're taking our class that we're paying for, and we're not getting any of the revenue. So we're working on an MOU to get a share of the revenues related to headcount over here. And we will do the same thing back with them in like that second bullet under course offerings with the pedagogy and the IHS program. We'll share some of our headcount for our students' revenue with them in an MOU fashion that can last like 2 to 3 years, maybe an initial first year to see how it works, and then 2 to 3 years and so on. We have an MOU with the HCOB, with the health administration. degree as well. So those things can be done. And all of this is for our students. It's
When
for
you
the
just
betterment
fixed
of our
mine.
students.
You
What?
just fixed mine.
Yeah.
Where College of Ed had been getting
Yes.
all the revenue.
Yes.
And that will move to
To
College of Health
our
and Human
college.
Services next year.
For that summer program.
No, for the consortium.
For the
So
consortium
Michigan
program.
teachers, for the Michigan teachers.
Yes.
But I think this is a really important part of this whole conversation. If we're gonna use this strategic resource model,
Uh-huh.
we need to have an administration that's willing to create win-win situations. And I stood at faculty senate and said exactly the same thing, standing behind the president. If all of these decisions are made creating winners and losers, we are going to lose the whole university. We have got to look at these situations and find win-win situations. And they might be, I mean, you're talking, things are gonna shrink.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Things will be cut.
Yeah.
That's okay. But if the whole picture of it is the best win-wins we can create, then we'll be okay. If it becomes cutthroat, we kill
Yeah.
each other.
Well, it was too bad because I was patched into that faculty senate meeting remotely. I was at my desk. And we had met some of the deans, 4 of us, like I said, with that subcommittee of the faculty senate. I'm surprised that information didn't roll up.
Well,
the
the
faculty
faculty
senate.
senate was saying, yeah, we as faculty are being pushed to do this. And I said, you're right, as
Yeah.
graduate studies council, I was standing in as the chair of that and saying it needs to not only be the faculty that are called upon to collaborate.
Yeah.
We need
Oh, yeah.
buy-in from the administration to make pathways that will allow more than one program to win.
Yeah.
People are standing and screaming, my program lost, my college lost,
Yeah.
right?
Well-
We've got to be able to effectively
And-
deal with that.
And unfortunately, there were some instances
Right.
of that happening early on. And I think those are what's,
I've
what-
been one of the ones
Yeah.
losing,
Yeah.
right? All of my money has gone to
Yeah.
Ed,
right,
even though I've done all the work.
yep.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah,
let's
yeah,
get
yeah,
that
it's
back.
working.
But there are other things where they said, oh, we're gonna design now, we don't need those courses out of CAS, we're gonna do them here in our college. I don't think that's a good idea. It's not the way I operate. It's just so you know, I think some of these examples, they're not maybe the best, but they're at least ones that I know of
Right.
where we're sharing.
Right.
Where it's not what's best for the college, it's what's best for the student.
Oh, and I was speaking in support of this,
Yeah.
this process
Approach, yeah.
moving forward. I think it's really
So
important
somehow
that,
we can get it over
Yeah.
if you can carry I mean, now you're not of the faculty any longer because you're an administrator, so I know,
Right.
it's a little tougher.
Is there a way we can not lose sight of that collaboration and these cross-college collaborative opportunities aren't only within faculty and the academic sphere?
Yeah,
They are
yeah.
also within the non-revenue generating units like
Oh, there you
IT.
go.
Well, I would love that,
That's an interesting
Joshua.
thought.
And we in IT are currently
Yep.
working together
Yep.
as collaborative people, but there's no money changing hands. There's
Yeah.
no monetary agreement as of yet, but we do it every day.
Yep.
And we're not incentivized in any way through SRM to do so,
I know,
but we do it.
that's one of the questions on there. What are the incentives for the
Yeah.
cost centers? And IT is a perfect example, if we can get it right, because there could be some savings in mass, right, for software and things like that, we should definitely, but there's other things like phones, that IT, I'm not saying, I don't know that we all need phones anymore, we save a lot of money, by the way. But, those are some ways to save on costs that I don't know where those discussions are. I don't know, frankly.
But you're not closing the door and telling him not
No,
to do it.
no,
No,
oh,
I
no,
mean, there's
no,
the-
Joshua knows
That's
that,
what
yeah,
I'm
go
saying,
for
yeah.
it.
That's what
But-
I'm suggesting, is he
Yes.
needs to be able to go to
Yeah.
his superior
I'm
and say,
actually-
hey, I got these collaborative
Yeah.
things going on, and get support for doing that.
He's front and
Doing a lot of
center
those
in
things,
this,
yeah,
yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah, they're doing a great, I mean, but I don't know who's like looking. Now, the director of IT, he's doing this.
And I'm
He,
just using that as an example. I think there are plenty of other
Yes.
places that could be in place, facilities management, who I think right now are, I don't know how we could even get them involved.
now I think we should have, you're right,
But
Mike.
they're, I see opportunities across campus for making SRM work better.
You have a mic, don't you, Joshua?
Do you have a mic?
I don't. No.
Well, now it's maybe too late.
That's okay. But I see opportunities, in other places across campus that I interact with all the time. Shipping and receiving, facilities management, crossing between us and unified clinics, which is actually falls under student affairs
Still
right now
louder.
still. I can just hold it closer. I'm not a loudspeaker, sorry. Us and student affairs, where we interact with unified clinics a lot, which, you know, David Longjohn right now is suffering with really, really old computers, and we could help them out, but we kind of can't because it's a whole different budget line. And it's like, oh,
Yep.
come on.
And auxiliaries are totally different.
It's a whole
Discussion.
different beast. So if we can make a point to have SRM affect or incentivize us to collaborate across academic affairs and student affairs, across non-academic departments, we could certainly make some huge impacts there. And I don't know who's looking at that besides Andy Holmes
Yeah.
and OIT.
And yeah, and there's I think that could probably go to business and finance. I think they should lead those discussions on what can we do when we look at the sort of the UPA, the costs, the centers that we need as the bedrock of our university, and how we could look for efficiencies and then those could even be reinvested into those cost centers to do it different. A big one is the green, our buildings being carbon neutral. In Michigan just put $3 billion into becoming carbon. I don't even know that's even close to enough, but it starts the process of being carbon neutral in 2040. By 2040 is what they want, but they have $3 billion to do it. That's Michigan. But there are other possibilities that we could get through our transformational campaign. Their goal is 1.2 billion, but maybe we jack up the goal. So I agree, there are ways. I don't know where it comes from, other than the kind of like IT is one. It's under academic affairs. We don't know why, but sorry, it should be a.
And Andy's working on that.
Yeah, I know. I think I might be on the committee to help them do that. So because it should be under a cabinet, it should be a cabinet position for IT, how important it is to how we function. So, I don't know what time is, real close. So just to let you know, we have a number of things with finding different students. So maybe we don't get the high school graduates because the numbers are going down. We still get them, but there's degree completion. There's ways to get an introduction across our campus of the health and human services professionals. Yes, Jen, we're putting in a proposal for a course. Not to take away, but there's a lot of undecided students in Merce State College. To really let people know, usually a lot of people come in for nursing and medicine or whatever, and they don't know what we all have to offer here. And then transfer articulation agreements and degree completion. So where are our students? And then we can look at other revenue options like differential graduate tuition. I mentioned that earlier. There's some room. We're a lot less costly than some other of our peers like Central and Eastern and Grand Valley
in some of our programs like PA, speech, PT and OT. So what could we do? Do we want to? And we want to make sure those, in this case, we want to make sure if we're charging our students more, we want that revenue to follow to us, right? In that case, that's one where we'll have to make sure that happens. Cohort sizes, can we look at those? Accreditation standards are always a rate limiting factor. One of our programs, we're going to factor in for attrition. So we're going to over-enroll just by a few, but we're going to do it. And then other types of things, not to mention grant and contract funding and philanthropic support and endowments. And oh, by the way, just yesterday, our new development officer, Trevor Block, started. He came in for the first, maybe it was Tuesday.
It was yesterday.
Yesterday, it was yesterday. So he's here to help us with a number. I'm gonna hold him back a little bit. He's got a lot of training to do with advancement and meeting everyone there. And then over the next few months, he'll be available to you to talk about your ideas with philanthropic support. And just to end, that these are the latest numbers we have out 2 days ago, I think, or Friday. Where we are, the green is good. So it's really kind of, this is 157 days out from fall though, remember that. But it is year to year, right? It's year over year. Same time last year, where were we to this time? And we're doing good, we're holding our own. Graduate and student credit hours is not like off the charts. Maybe they just enrolled earlier, so we have to be very careful. Remember last year was that first year where we couldn't enroll for students. They had to do it themselves, so there might have been a lag there, so I'm cautiously optimistic. Headcount is though, we're about the same as last year. That's a good thing. Now the campus is down.
7%.
So remember, this is all proportionate. So we're going to what we will get with the revenues related to proportionate undergrad, proportionate grad. And I think that's it. So I want to leave with something at least a little positive. But we're going to be okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Not exactly about this, but I think has an effect.
Can we get a mic to, sorry, I should have been monitoring that better. We're recording this.
So
That's
it's
why.
not exactly about this, but I think it has an effect on CHHS in particular. I've been in 3 meetings now where programs in College Health and Human Services are struggling with short-term housing for their students. I know when Susan was the dean of the graduate college, she put housing for graduate students as a major concern. It has to do with how graduate students are accepted, whether there's housing available, all kinds of things. But a unique one for College of Health and Human Services, and it may not be unique, it may be that we just don't know that other people have this issue, is for short-term housing.
Like summers with your
We need 4 weeks. The PhD program needs
programs.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
The PA program needs, anybody else in the room need
Yeah,
housing for
yeah.
students that's short-term?
And some of the PAs, they're going to other communities for short term.
I mean,
Right.
this is really an issue. We've got competitive programs across the country that are taking our students. We know we lost 7 last year who
Because of
went
that.
to other places who said, we have free housing for you. Not even good housing. You know, housing at a school for the blind, housing at, just not excellent housing, but it was taken care of. And there were options. There is absolutely nothing worse than sending out a link to students to a housing option where they're going to be told, you either have to pay for the summer or nothing.
So I think I would like to, maybe you and me meet with Barry and Diane Anderson.
Great.
I know we had some communications recently
So I
back
think
and
we
forth.
need to call Kieran in and we need the PA guys in
Yeah,
too.
And I would like some testimonials, like emails, here's what happened, we're losing people, they're not happy, whatever. I think those types of communications. Yes, I'm willing to do that too,
Okay.
so. And we can bring in Christine Bird Jacobs into the discussion.
And I'm not sure it even needs to be the university housing.
Right.
Maybe there's an apartment close
Yeah.
by who's willing to do short-term housing.
Short-term.
We used to do it at the university on what was called conference housing.
Okay.
You know, my sports camp comes and does a week.
Yeah.
Why can my students not? That just is
Mhm.
really inequitable.
So let's follow up on that, that'd be great.
Thanks.
So it's about time, right? But thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Encourage others to come tomorrow, we have another session.